Well, good morning or good early afternoon here from Finland. We have reached in our work of letters on occult meditation, letter number 2. And we've had so far, I think, is this our 5th program right now? Looks like it. So we've had 4 programs and I've gone over quite a few interesting things, I think, musical things that tell us something about the musical structure of the universe and well, at least I would say yes, the universe, but at least our local cosmos system and our solar system, and especially our planet. So now we're ready to go on to the importance of meditation. And I'll just get one of those little brackets in case there's something to fill in. Such a wonderful little book this is. Well, maybe it's not so little. It's actually 300 pages long. And the externalization of the hierarchy was 701 pages long. That was a big one. And Cosmic Fire, 1,200 and something. Well, we have finished with Cosmic Fire, and now we're trying to, explain it a little more in depth. Today is the 21st of July, 2020. And we proceed. The importance of meditation. Alice Bailey said, so many people study, but they may not learn to meditate. They ignore that, or at least don't give it the attention they should. There's just so many ways to meditate, but it really involves purification and the increasing of the point of tension to promote greater realization of higher states of consciousness, and also the ability to work within those higher states of consciousness. Not only to receive that which they reveal, but to be able to do something with them to help the lower worlds. So with this importance of meditation, we'll have a few sections. It's number 1, it results in egoic contact and alignment, which is at our stage of evolution the objective. It brings about a state of equilibrium. It stabilizes vibration, and it assists in a transference of polarization. These will be subjects that DK will take up, and this is written, or it appears to be anyway, within Gemini of 1920, just about 100 years ago, a little more than 100 years ago. Now, what was it that Alice Bailey typed when she worked with the Tibetan? 7 pages of single-spaced typing per session. That's a lot. So it's hard to translate that into, what has appeared in the books. But we have to be grateful that she could, in those days, without computers, process information so well. So let me, this morning, he says, give you some more thoughts on the subject of meditation. They will bear somewhat on the matter given yesterday and on the 16th ultimo. Not quite sure what that means. maybe it's an obvious thing, but I'll just have to skip over it for a minute unless that was the... Anyway, fundamentally, meditation is to assist alignment and so permit a contact with the higher self. Remember, it all begins with the attempt to achieve alignment, and in a way it ends. The process ends with alignment, with the achieving of it, giving that clear vorticular channel that allows the high to enter the low and the low to supplicate that which is higher. So permitting of contact with the higher self, and by the higher self, he pretty much is going to mean mostly the consciousness within the causal body, but we're also defining the higher self in a more appropriate manner as the spiritual triad. So hence its institution, in other words, the reason that we apply it and use it. I would, in order to elucidate, take up the study of this topic under the following heads. Okay, I'm just going to, I just like colors. Wish I had more, then I could make everything still more appropriate. Sometimes I have to use colors in a way that is not necessarily meaningful, but just offers distinction. And sometimes they are meaningful. Okay, so under the following headings, heads, the importance of meditation, points considered when assigning a meditation. All of these are important. The use of the sacred word in meditation. Dangers to be avoided in meditation. The use of form in meditation. The use of color and sound in meditation. Access to the masters through meditation. Future schools of meditation. Purification of the vehicles and the exoteric life of service. And, this is, well, really, it's taking us all the way through the book. That's actually what is happening here. All these subjects take us through the entire remainder. So let us, he says today, take up the consideration of the first point. What makes meditation of importance? Sometimes it really doesn't hurt to go back to the fundamentals, because it helps set more complicated matters raised later in a proper context. What makes meditation of importance? The emphasis upon the importance of meditation follows naturally upon the realization by the student of the absolute necessity for the domination of the personality by the ego, either by the angel of the presence in the causal body, or by the spiritual triad. I suppose really, when you're using the word spiritual triad, should be capitalized. Absolute necessity of the domination of the personality by the ego. Flashing red. And if we are to achieve higher states of consciousness and get everything spelled correctly. Okay. Man at this time is engaged in many pursuits And through the force of circumstances, he is polarized entirely in the lower self, that polarization being in either the emotional or mental body. Is this polarization within the mental body, or at this stage, is it focus? Because polarization, as he is telling us when he's describing the sixth initiation in the rays and the initiations, occurs at the midway point between the second and third initiations. So by that time, a human being would not be entirely polarized in the lower self. There would be a partial polarization within the soul, and the ability to register streams of energy from the causal body. One point of interest I would indicate, as long as the polarization is purely physical or purely emotional, no need for meditation is ever felt. Even when the mental body is active, and that can still be even in the hall of ignorance, because the ignorance is of the higher of the pairs of opposites. It doesn't mean you don't have a mind that can be used. So even when the mental body is active, no urge arises until the man has run through many changes and many lives, and has tasted the cup of pleasure and of pain through many incarnations. The kind of idea of having to confront experience through the symbol of the cup, the finality of it being, at least for a human being, the cup of karma, has sounded the depths of the life lived entirely for the lower self and found it unsatisfying. I'm sure this is somewhat the case with a number of us. I've sometimes stated and restated that Madame Blavatsky said that for some, theosophy is their last hope. Then he begins to turn his thought to other things and to aspire to that which is unknown, to realize and sense within himself the pairs of opposites, higher and lower self, and to contact within his consciousness possibilities and ideals undreamt of hitherto. Okay. I want to bring that out a bit, emphasize that. We don't yet, most of us, remember our many lives, and maybe some are just not worth remembering. Maybe they contributed very little to the values content of the causal body. But we all have tasted of the cup of pleasure and pain, and we all have lived for the personality, and around us we see those who still are. And we would say, wake up and don't live only for the lower self or personality, but we find that they must, just as we have had to do. Because it's only when you sound the depths for yourself that you're ready to move on. If you're forced to move on, then there'll always be that nostalgia or that feeling of, what if I had engaged still more in the other kind of life? So we can force up to a point, and especially when the times and the cycles make energy availability to promote the forcing a more doable process. And maybe such is the case now, because the energies available are tremendous and the obstacles are there too. But I'm sure that, we wouldn't be reading the Tibetan with any degree of deep attention unless we were aspiring to that which is unknown and had the sense of the higher self within ourselves, or the higher power, as they call it in the 12-step program. Excuse me. And to contact within his consciousness possibilities and ideals undreamt of hitherto. The spirit always wants to move on until it re-identifies with itself really being everything. So he has come to a point where success, popularity, and diverse gifts are his, maybe something like the apotheosis of the personality per se, and yet from their use he derives no content. As sometimes, we see these cases of people who achieve what to them looked like the pinnacle of success, and they quote unquote have it all, and then they commit suicide because they're in such despair with that mantra: is that all there is to this? Is this all? And they don't realize there are ways for them to go ahead. Always the urge within persists until the pain is so severe that the desire to reach out and up, as Master Moria says, you're often surrounded by evil. The only way you can, well, maybe you can break through it, but the only way is up, or the likely way, to ascertain something and someone beyond overcomes all obstacles. So always, he has come to the point where success, popularity, and diverse gifts are his, and yet from their use he derives no content. Not content, but content. Always the urge within persists until the pain is so severe that the desire to reach out and up, to ascertain something and someone beyond, overcomes all obstacles. Well, it's true, I think, for everybody. And sometimes I think it's especially true for the second ray type. If you turn to esoteric psychology, volume 1, around page, I'm going to just guess. Yeah, well, there it is. I hit it. And, I know it's that horrible indigo color that you can't read through. Well, it's not indigo, even it's, maybe if it was indigo, you really couldn't read through it. But this is maybe one of the darker blues. The student on this ray is ever unsatisfied with his highest attainments. No matter how great his knowledge, his mind is still fixed on the unknown, the beyond, and on the heights as yet unscaled. So that fits, doesn't it? It fits very much, and that's page 203 of Esoteric Psychology, Volume 1. So the, whoops, Let's get that correct. The man begins to turn within and to seek the source from whence he came. This is the true spiritual introversion, not some unhealthy introverted attitude which does not allow you to make contact meaningfully with others. Then he begins to meditate, to ponder, to intensify vibration until in process of time, he garners the fruit of meditation, and may it be so for each and every one of us. Four things meditation does. You know, if we have this really, really healthy respect for meditation and we know what it really is from the occult perspective, we are going to garner the fruits of meditation. If we choose some method that is not sanctioned by the hierarchy, we'll find ourselves simply getting into trouble. Number one, it enables a man to contact the ego and to align the three lower bodies. So the beauties of the higher world can come through. Yes, that's one thing it does. And as we have been discussing, you know, we are so often out of alignment. One or other of our bodies may be out of alignment, and the whole of the personality nature, unfortunately, out of alignment with the higher self, or with the energies within the causal body. It puts a man into an attitude of equilibrium, neither utterly receptive and negative, nor utterly positive, but at the point of balance. And obviously the sign Libra is involved, and it will have its effect at the first initiation, bringing about this equilibrium and some kind of increasing balance between the sacral center and the throat center. It will also operate at the second initiation, bringing a degree of serenity and tranquility to the versatile psychic nature, and especially in the area of glamour, which is the emotional plane, and maybe a balanced, more balanced state of mind, especially as we approach the third initiation. You know, we can see, and I've dealt with this in my book on the egoic lotus, that every sign can have its contribution to a particular developmental phase leading towards initiation. Thus is afforded opportunity to the ego and later to the master to disturb that equilibrium when Mars and Scorpio intervene and tune the quiescent vibration to a higher note than heretofore, to cause the consciousness to vibrate to a newer and higher measure, and to swing, if so I may express it, into the periphery of the threefold spirit, which we, can consider related to the spiritual triad, and especially to the monad. The monad really is the threefold spirit. And you can see will, wisdom, and activity. Will, wisdom, and activity are the keys there. So we can never uphold this peaceful, harmonious, rather pleasant equilibrium for long, or we just won't move on. We have to stabilize the equilibrium, use it as a foundational plateau for further attainment, and then go through the pain of disturbance, either from the ego or from our own inner longing for still higher experiences of release into more spiritual revelations and possibilities of enactment. We can do more from the higher planes. So a newer and higher measure, if we ever stop wanting that, then we have stagnated. And it's, it's bad. And just as bad as the religious dogmas that think they are the last word in the revelation. Of course, it's when you know something about spiritual occultism, you know it is almost comical to think in that way if it weren't so terribly destructive. You fight and you kill others over the fact that they want to move farther than you are willing to move. And you put down a obstructive wall against the further possibility of growth. And dogma tends to do that, whether we're talking about, here in the West, the dogma of Christianity or of Islam, maybe Judaism to a certain extent. But that has to be relinquished as soon as human beings relinquish their fear of the light, their fear of further expansive possibilities, their suppression of the sublime, and more insidiously, their repression, unconscious suppression, their repression of the sublime. It's amazing, we may think we long for the light, and deep down we do, but there's so much about our personal attitudes that recoils from the light and delays the day when we can benefit from the greater light. Delays the day when in that light we shall see light. By the constant practice of this, the whole point of equilibrium is gradually shifted higher and higher, and I call that, in a way, the point of tension being shifted higher and higher. And I think I'll put it down, equivalent to the point of tension being shifted higher and higher, until the time comes when the lower point of attraction in the swinging and adjustment is not the physical, touches not the emotional, contacts not the mental, the causal body even escaping, and the man is polarized in the spiritual consciousness from thenceforth as the masters are polarized in the spiritual triad. So the point of equilibrium then rests in the spiritual state, and when we become the Chohan of the sixth degree, it abides in the monadic state. There's always a range, above and below. You can aspire above, you can reach down and still assist below the point of equilibrium. we may have a customary point of tension, and for the masters it is within the spiritual triad, Buddhi and Atma. But for every attainment of a new degree of initiation, that point of tension, that point of equilibrium, it relocates itself in a higher vibrational state. So point of tension equals point of equilibrium. Yeah, point of equilibrium. The whole question about what is a point, oh, it is a mystery. It is, and yet it is not. It has no dimension, and yet it is. And eventually, in absoluteness, it is not. Anyway, higher and higher and polarizing after the destruction of the causal body onto or within the Buddhic plane, no longer a point of tension or a point of equilibrium, even on the higher mental plane. And this is something, to which we can look forward, because obviously we're not there yet. This marks the fourth initiation, the Tibetan says. After that initiation, the adept, usually it's a term for the fifth initiation, makes for himself a body of manifestation, a free creation. There is nothing in him to call into objectivity a body for use in the three worlds and evolved under the law of causes. We might say a normally created personality vehicle. Nothing like that calls to him, and so he instead, as you well know, he creates a Maya Virupa, a vehicle of Maya, but one that is definitely tangible. It reminds one of sort of doubting Thomas. I guess he had a lot of fifth ray, and Christ, I suspect, using the resurrected body of Jesus, but a body that doesn't seem to, it seems to have had extra quality. He asked Thomas to, put his finger within the wound, and, it was a tangibility which Thomas could relate to. But we have to be grateful for these fifth-ray people, because they avoid the inaccuracies of the scholastic type, who may just sit and dream things up based on what he considers to be a higher perspective, but which is not correlated with the testimony of the senses, which have to be used to check the accuracy of the hypotheses. As a matter of fact, they go beyond the hypothesis altogether and just deductively declare, I'm speaking now of the scholastics, or in some philosophers, deductively declare that this is so, just because they've thought it up. I know what it is to be that type, and I also know the patience it might take to regulate that speculation with the proof the testimony of that which the senses actually reveal. So a body of manifestation comes about either by normal, natural means or through the power of Kriya Shakti, which I think is pertaining to the higher to the monadic plane, a siddhi pertaining to the monadic plane. And let's see if I do this and succeed. I never know if I will succeed. Here we have diagrams. And these are the AB diagrams. And let's see. If we look at this, well, the liberated and unlimited, unliberated creative hierarchies are here, and I'm going to get a couple more for us. I know you're not looking at that right now, but you will be shortly. And this file explorer will take us maybe where we need to go. And here we go. Yeah, okay. So, let's see if I can share my screen properly. Now I'm sharing again. And here we have a place called Materializing the Ideal. It is kind of the source of the Shakti called Kriya Shakti, and from here comes the power under Virgo, interestingly, to materialize the ideal form, which is the Maya Virupa. The Tibetan is not working through well, he wasn't, I don't know about now, a Maya Virupa, but Master KH and Master Moria are. So beyond a certain point, nothing calls to the high initiate. Nothing in the lower world calls them in via desire. They simply materialize, and let's see if I can, yeah. They simply materialize for the sake of service, materialize a vehicle that they can use, and which is in every respect, well, usually identical to the one in which they have taken the fifth initiation, if they have taken the fifth initiation in a normally generated vehicle. All of these Shaktis are powers, and you can see them all the way down from the topmost level of the cosmic material plane, cosmic physical, Parashakti, plane 7, 6, Kriya Shakti, plane 5, Jnana Shakti, that's the Shakti of mind, Mantrika Shakti, the Shakti of the word, on the Buddhic plane, and Icha Shakti, I don't know how to pronounce that exactly. It pertains to the mental plane, the will to manifest. The Jnana Shakti pertains to a kind of mental plane because the ethnic plane is a kind of mental plane within the cosmic ethers, and then Kundalini Shakti having to do with the astral plane and the lunar lords, and then the inert baskets of nourishment, and apparently no Shaktis are connected with that level. They are the elemental lives, the baskets of nourishment, the blinded lives. They are moved about rather than impelling the movement. All right, well, just a little digression there. And okay, so the fourth initiation, and after that, if one becomes an adept, but I think it's possible even as an arhat to make a body of manifestation, a free creation, and there's nothing to call him into objectivity. There's nothing to call a normally created body into objectivity. Can you be born an initiate of the fourth degree? Well, maybe Yogananda was, maybe. He certainly became an initiate of the fourth degree, and he worked with, bouncing about. He worked with Sri Yukta Swar, who was a master, a full master. All right, more here about what meditation does. Number one, it enables us to contact the ego and align the three lower bodies with the ego. And it puts a man in a state of equilibrium, neither entirely positive or negative. It's a very Libran state. And number three, it stabilizes the lower vibrations on the subplanes of the emotional and mental planes. And usually that's, called the versatile psychic nature. And it's filled with instability. Such an instability that no real truth can penetrate if it remains in the unstable condition. Just the way, let's just say, if you're out on the water and it's perfectly calm, the sun reflects itself as an integrated whole. If the water gets choppy, the wind comes up and so forth, maybe an analogy to disturbing thoughts, then the image of the sun is broken up. Maybe it's found in the little wavelets, but there's a kind of division of the whole, which prevents the true image from coming through. So stability then upon the emotional and mental planes. Meditation can give this, and heavens knows we need it, because the psyche of man these days is, really very unstable in general, and you see that working out on the physical plane. So many psychological afflictions are there, and we sort of force those on others simply by acting out what we are, and we don't have the psychological insight to see these things, and we project these miserable conditions onto others who either don't have them or don't have them to the same extent. Anyway, going on, it commences the work of attuning the self to the vibration of the third subplane of each of the three lower planes. And that will take us actually into the knowledge petals, interestingly enough, on the mental plane, because right now, at least, the chakras which come from the vortices, I think, of the egoic plane are not existing. The causal body is taking their place with its petals. But the three, and that will make intelligent man. The third subplane, let's call it the third ether. The third subplane of the astral plane, which is sort of the one of the etheric subplanes of the astral plane, etheric astrality. And then, of course, on the mental plane, we already have entered the higher mind if we deal with the third subplane, which takes into consideration the knowledge petals of the egoic lotus. So the self is attuned to the vibration of the third subplane, and this, so you can't really be taking incarnation at first on the third ray, and certainly not the second and first rays. Both in terms of personality, when personality begins to manifest, and in terms of soul, it's got to be 4, 5, 6, or 7. When there is a movement to the number 3, it represents progress. And it tells us that we're making, in a way, our first contact with the subplanes on which we find the egoic lotus. And I wonder if I can maybe show that in any way. Yeah, because as we're going to see here, the knowledge petals would correlate with a polarization or a fixation of the egoic lotus upon the third sub-level. The second sub-level correlates very much with the love petals. And as far as I know, there is no polarization of the egoic body upon the first subplane. That is already the province of the spiritual triad and the monastic permanent atom. Well, these are technicalities, but at some point they will be useful to us, and we will see and we will know, and we have to see exactly what we're talking about, and in order to be able to manipulate and make a difference. You know, it just means to use the hand to rearrange things. The M-A-N, it's the hand, you know. Manual, it's manual. So we use the outer hand and also the Mercurian inner hand to change the arrangement of things relative to each other so that they more closely resemble how they are supposed to be according to the archetype. Okay, well, I've said that, I think, many times. So when we manage here to stabilize these lower vibrations, the work is commenced of attuning the self to the vibration of the third subplane on each of the 3 lower planes until that subplane is dominated. And pretty much at the third initiation, we find the third subplane on the higher mental level, or on the mental plane, dominated. And we're moving on into a cultivation of the intuition. The second subplane is the next to be synchronized, and this is occurring around the time of the first initiation, at least initially. You see initiation, and the word initially, it means to be a beginning. I would say that people like yourself and myself and those avid students and meditators in Master DK's program have more than likely transferred the focus of their egoic lotus onto the second subplane. Okay. But we have to be able to look in there and actually see it. Response to group vibration is the siddhi or the power associated with that second subplane. Not just spiritual discernment of the third subplane down. That's important. Identifying what is spiritual in a mass of information. But the next step, response to group vibration. And then when we begin to be able to take advantage of the abstract mind via the monastic permanent atom, then we have spiritual telepathy. Page 188, right around there in Cosmic Fire, will give us the various siddhis or powers of the subplanes in relation to the senses. And we should I'm sorry. We should memorize those. Because although we may not be able to actually touch them in terms of the experience yet, they will open a door before us and bring clarity to our striving and show the relationships. We have, for instance, a siddhi we call realization on the Atmic plane. And it correlates with divine vision on the Buddhic plane. And that correlates with mental clairvoyance on the mental plane, and with, I think, with clairvoyance on the astral plane. And it correlates with the gaseous plane on the etheric physical plane. Those correlations are of note, and we can learn about each of these powers or tendencies by comparing them. I mean, after all, what is the difference between realization and divine vision? An Atmic and then a Buddhic quality related to the fifth subplane. Well, vision is vision. There's still a separation between the observer and that which is seen. But realization is already beginning to embrace something deeper, some kind of identification, some kind of participation, which vision does not give. Well, I think none of us is really adept at recognizing divine vision or realization, but I think that's the tendency. That's the tendency in which we will be moving. Okay, so the second subplane comes into focus, not just when we're an intelligent human being, the way the third subplane begins to come into focus, but when we are actually stepping into the hall of wisdom. And then we can have our first initiation. We can have a personality on the first or second ray, whereas before we couldn't really have that. What we had was the first or second ray being delivered astrologically which is more of an indirect influence. You know, I've been going through the destiny of the nations and analyzing the horoscopes with DK, or seeing how he does it, analyzing the horoscopes of certain prominent nations, and he has direct influences and indirect. And no personality of the first or second ray can result from a direct influence before the first initiation. Now that's, you know, if we want second ray in the personality, it's maybe going to come through Gemini, Virgo, or Pisces, or maybe through one of the planets, indirectly, but not a direct ray influence. And it's also so for the soul, you cannot have a second or first ray soul until the first initiation is being taken, at which time maybe transferences can occur according to the rules of transference. Sixth and fourth ray souls can transfer onto the second ray, and there was one example of a seventh ray soul doing that. Seems like an anomaly to me. And onto the first ray, seventh ray souls can transfer, and fifth ray souls. So the first initiation is a really important line of demarcation, simply between knowledge and more customary forms of love, and real wisdom and the beginning in earnest of sacrificial love. A lot of our sacrificial love is, it exists, but it can be unconscious, as in the case, you know, of the animal, or of the more primitive human being, just sacrificing for the children, for the offspring, and having that be an instinctual response and not knowing why one is doing it. Well, an animal cannot know in that respect, but at least does. So the second subplane is the next to become synchronized, and basically I'm saying that true aspirants and real disciples, they do have the possibility of focusing on the second subplane of the mental plane. A man reaches the point of personality attainment in this cycle. Who knows how it will be in future cycles? I think he gives himself space. When he has the capacity to vibrate and move consciously on the fourth subplane. That's the, mentally, that's the plane of discrimination. And I think it's the fourth ether, the lowest of the ethers. And if we're going to look here at a treatise on cosmic fire, page 188, it will be the plane of psychometry. I'll just show that to you. And here it is, the fourth subplane. Well, the number 4 has everything to do with the personality, which is a fourfoldness. The 3 vehicles plus the sum of the 3, which makes the 4th. Okay. So he reaches the point of personality attainment when he can, and this interesting idea, move consciously on, or at least deal with, in a somewhat natural way, the vibrations of the fourth subplane. We might term the fourth subplane on the physical, that's the fourth ether, emotional, that's psychometry, and mental, that's discrimination. On the physical, emotional, and mental planes, when dominated and aligned and functioning simultaneously in the same incarnation, the plane of perfected personality, in the concrete sense of the word, and from the lower vision. So it's a technical matter that gives us the truly integrated personality, but integrated within itself, not integrated with the egoic lotus, much less significantly infused by the energy radiated through the egoic lotus. So let's read that again. We might term the fourth subplane on the physical, emotional, and mental planes, when dominated, aligned, and functioning simultaneously, that's the thing, in the same incarnation, because so often we may have functioning in relation to this fourth level, but it'll be now and then and not simultaneously with the two others. Well, we can call that the plane of perfected personality in the concrete sense of the word and from the lower vision. And I think, at some point he talks about the magnificent personality, or one that is really achieved and attained within its own right. And he uses the example of a four, maybe a fourth ray soul and a fourth ray personality, or at least two fours involved in it. Maybe, we have three places where they can occur: soul, personality, and mind. And he looks at having two of them functioning simultaneously. He may even, when he's discussing the great artist and scientist Leonardo, he may make that, offer that example. I think it's in Esoteric Psychology, Volume 1. So that particular incarnation will be one in which the man achieves the fullest expression of his lower self, physically perfect, emotionally vibrant, and mentally, what a word, colossal. And I think now it does make me want to find Leonardo, if I can. And maybe I can't, but let's just see. I can never take too long looking for things, because then it's a waste of time. Leonardo. Okay, well, here's an analogous expression on the fourth ray. Julius Caesar on the first ray, the Buddha and the Christ on the second. Leonardo da Vinci was an analogous expression. Probably by now he's a master, I would guess. The rays concerning energy and consciousness. Let's see. Is there anything here that really gives us what we need to know? He does say something interesting. I have said that first ray energy works out as the destruction of forms. It must be remembered that a pure destroyer is utterly unknown, and mercifully for the race, this is so. It is a beneficent condition that as yet a first-ray ego is so handicapped and limited by the form nature and the quality of that form nature that it is unable to make adequate or intelligent use of destructive force. Okay, well, somewhere it is, okay? And I think what we've just been reading about being mentally colossal and emotionally vibrant and physically perfect, all that, is an important reference. So let's see if I can and I hope I've got you tuned in there. I so often make the mistake of not changing the picture. Yeah, and indeed I didn't. Well, there it is. And here's the other factor, Leonardo being quite a pure type on the fourth ray. I think, there might be one other possibility of finding what I'm looking for, and I'll give it one more try. And meanwhile, moving that picture around and around, I'll just not check number one. Leonardo, we have, in fact, 7 references. And as long as we're doing this is how a tangent works. Leonardo, the inspired artist, Leonardo da Vinci. And let's see what else. And here are great individuals: Luther, Columbus, Shakespeare, Leonardo. Shakespeare and Leonardo in the same breath. Whoever Shakespeare really was, that's another matter. And here's the one we've just been looking at: Leonardo, an analogous expression. So here we have the mental body of every human being at some time or another is found upon the fourth ray, and when the man is nearing the probationary path. This means that the mental vehicle is governed by an elemental of fourth ray nature. And usually when the man, governed by an elemental of fourth ray nature or quality, and therefore creative artistic activity is the line of least resistance. When we then have a man of an artistic tendency, or we have a genius along some creative work, when at the same time the soul or the personality is upon the fourth ray, then we will find a Leonardo da Vinci or a Shakespeare. Well, this is the one I was looking for. This is a very important statement. And if the mental elemental is upon the fourth ray, and either the soul or personality is found upon the fourth ray, then you have the genius along some line of creative work. And here he's comparing caveman drawings to Leonardo's, and great people on different rays, including an Einstein, interestingly, a St. Francis along the sixth ray, a Christ, a Buddha along the second ray, Leonardo and Shakespeare the fourth, a Newton upon the third and fifth, I would say. Yeah, okay, well that I think tells us some important things. Now let's go back. Little digressions may be illuminating or maddening, depends on how you see it. So he's talking about that domination of the fourth subplane. And maybe that would mean having a fourth ray mind and some kind of emotional response along the fourth ray line and be able to touch the lowest or fourth ether. Then that particular incarnation will be one in which the man achieves the fullest expression of his lower self. Physically perfect, emotionally vibrant, and mentally colossal. So combine that with the statement about Leonardo and Shakespeare having a fourth ray mind, apparently, and either, along with it, a fourth ray personality and or a fourth ray soul. My guess is that, well, whatever Shakespeare was, I suspect the fourth ray soul. I suspect also the fourth ray soul in the case of Leonardo, but the fifth ray was definitely there, and we have to find out how it was so. Not so much for Shakespeare, but for the inventor Leonardo, definitely. So the estimation of the mental ray, very important matter. Then succeeding that 444, as it were, begins the transference to higher vibration, the keying up to the higher self and the attuning of the personality, or the major third, to the dominant fifth of the ego. We do remember. That's the major third. And that's the dominant fifth of the ego, and you might expect it to have some kind of connection with Leo. Now, the astonishing thing, if you look chromatically at how this might work, or maybe just 5 notes to Leo, Leo. But if we go the other way, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and then Libra, get married under Libra. Here comes the bride. That's interesting. If we go chromatically, have I got it right? That's a D. That's an E, or maybe Gemini. If we go chromatically, that's Cancer. Nostalgia. Nostalgia. Leo. I was wrong. That's Virgo. Okay. That's dividing the octave into the tritone, and that's Libra, and then So, interestingly, chromatically, in these half-step increments, we have the fifth note, or the perfect fifth, being like the fifth petal of the egoic lotus, ruled by Scorpio, and also by Leo. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo. And that's so interesting how that comes together, because we know that by a certain method of looking at the egoic lotus, if I can, all I got to do is find the egoic lotus, huh? I'll find it. And here it is. If we do petal 1 to 2, it goes like this. Dum, dum, that's Taurus. 3 is Gemini. 4 is Cancer. 5 is Leo. Okay, but if we say that the love petals are water petals, which is another way of looking at it, then the second water petal is Scorpio, because we always go cardinal, which is Cancer, bum bum. Let's see, bum bum, that's Cancer. And the 5th petal is going to give us Scorpio, the next water sign here, and the 6th petal, Pisces. Well, a little find, as it were, here. Okay. Forgive me, you know, the Lord's Prayer, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And I have to modify the Lord's Prayer in the case of these commentaries and ask, forgive me my digressions. So anyway, the transference to a higher vibration, the keying up to the higher self, and the attuning of the personality, or the major third, to the dominant 5th of the ego. Now, when we're becoming soul-infused personalities, that tuning up is going on, and a complete attunement of that, I think, the dominant 5th to the fundamental, dum, bum, yada, da, da, dum, bum, would be a master. And then we start moving beyond that, or at least a soul-infused personality of the 3rd degree. I'm sure we can find a place for every kind of initiate within the scale. Probably the diatonic scale of 7 notes, or the chromatic scale of 12 notes, but not, I don't think, the pentatonic scale of 5 notes. I don't think so. That's more related to Brahma per se. Okay. Well, excuse my musical digressions. I keep on coming back to them, you know. That's just an occupational hazard of working with me. So then, what else does meditation do? It assists in the transference of the polarization from one of the permanent atoms of the personality into the corresponding atom in the spiritual triad. And later he will elucidate this. Now, you know, we do have a problem. We can easily see how we can without too many claims for initiatory rank, transfer from the mental unit, which is a kind of permanent atom in the personality, it's got 4 spiridae, to a polarization within the monastic permanent atom. Add those 2 together, you get 7 spiridae. And that kind of transference can be achieved by the time the third initiation is taken. The only trouble with the other transferences, you know, the Buddhic permanent atom correlates with the astral permanent atom, and the atmic permanent atom, like the Buddhic, having 3 spirillae, correlates with the etheric permanent atom. The only trouble is those first subplanes on the atmic and Buddhic plane are even beyond the reach of a master. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but the siddhi, or the power, found upon the first 2 subplanes of the Buddhic and the first 2 subplanes of the atmic, counting from above below, require an initiatory status higher than that of a master. So the question is, how do we transfer polarization into a higher permanent atom found on one of those 2 subplanes? You know, just to remind us here, here are the permanent atoms of the Buddhic and the atmic plane. So visually speaking, the first 2 subplanes of the Buddhic and the first 2 subplanes of the atmic have siddhis, or powers, that are beyond the reach of a master. So how do we then polarize within them? I mean, I think we can receive some kind of transformed flow or stream of energy from them, but to polarize within them, well, it escapes me yet how that can be done by, you know, the average meditator, even moving towards the third initiation. Okay, but anyway, I will put it down. It assists, meditation assists, maybe eventually, you know, in the transference of the polarization from one of the permanent atoms of the personality into the corresponding atom in the spiritual triad. Lower mind to higher mind, astral to Buddhic, etheric physical permanent atom to atmic permanent atom. The sum, interesting, 27 is the sum. Here's how I will arrive at that. The threefold, let me get this straight. The sevenfold etheric permanent atom is added to the threefold atmic permanent atom, and that's a 10. It's a Kabbalistic kind of arrangement. The sevenfold Buddhic sevenfold astral permanent atom is added to the threefold Buddhic permanent atom, another 10. And the fourfold mental unit, the way things are now with the solar angel intervening, the fourfold mental unit is added to the threefold monastic permanent atom, and that's a 7. 10 plus 10 plus 7, 27. 27 being important. You know, watch out for numerical affinity. It can be revealing. In terms of the number of students and the 3 teachers in the advanced schools, and also the number of participants in the 10th or synthetic seed group. So when you see commonality of numbers, you know, the magical workers, I think they're called, or something like that. Creative workers, magical workers, something like that. When you see those numbers being the same, you know there are lines of connection via numerical affinity. So just to review, what good is meditation? It assists the polarization, the transference of polarization from one of the permanent atoms of the personality into the corresponding atom, and that's a matter of real initiation, and to a certain extent, I would say, very high initiation. What else does meditation do? It stabilizes the lower vibrations on the subplanes of the emotional and mental planes. That's another one of the necessities that meditation contributes to. What else does it do? It puts a man into an attitude of equilibrium, neither utterly receptive and negative, nor utterly positive, but at a point of balance. And that's kind of a description of what Libra does. And what else does it do? It enables a man to contact the ego and to align the three lower bodies, not only among themselves, but with the ego, considering the ego in this case to be the causal center on the higher mental plane. We might also, in another way, consider it to be the threefold spiritual triad. All right, so now we have 4 things which meditation contributes to, and can we memorize those 4 things to which meditation contributes? And he will elucidate this further. Now, the technicalities of the ageless wisdom are many. And yes, we do need a certain amount of the retentive memory and the fifth ray discriminative tendency that focuses on facts and their relationship to one another. We do need that as we proceed to work in the field of occultism in the way the Master DK presents it, with meticulous entirety. Hence may easily be seen the essential nature of meditation and its wise, diligent, and serious following. We don't want to be, as Master M says, light-minded about it. We want to keep at it, and we don't want to go too far, lest we damage ourselves. The people who decide, well, I'm going to meditate all day, 10 hours, whatever, they could be preparing for inflammation of the brain, the rending of the protective etheric veils, the inflow of very low levels of the astral plane. Many things can happen when you disregard the protective procedures. Early in experience, after the attainment of the highest the lower nature has to offer, man begins to meditate. Well, the spirit is always moving on, isn't it? It can never be satisfied with anything but itself, and itself is pure being, life, and ultimately absoluteness. Early in experience, after the attainment of the highest the lowest nature has to offer, man begins to meditate. Well, we don't know, unless we really know our past lives, how much meditation we have done. and whether it has been, what can I say, mystical or somewhat mental occult. You know, he did talk about great mystics. He also talked about ancient spiritual, well, not too ancient. Some hundreds of years ago, a student of occultism like Meister Eckhart. So funny, I used to read him and other mystics. I don't know if I made the discrimination between what Eckhart was doing and some others, which were maybe far more mystical. But he really talks about Eckhart as a mental occultist. And I was thinking, you know, the popular author who's made so many videos, Eckhart Tolle, T-O-L-L-E, Tolle, Eckhart Tolle. There's some link there between the words Eckhart. They may not be spelled exactly the same, but they're very close. Disorderly at first are his attempts, and sometimes several incarnations may go by in which the higher self only forces the man to think and seriously to meditate at rare and separated intervals. You know, we have a downward gazing soul here at this stage of development. And, you know, instead of looking in every, 300 years, every 1,000 years, well, maybe those are the kind of spans which at first relate to the master getting a report on a student. That should be humbling when we realize what great consequence we really are, that every few hundred years the master may take a little bit of interest in a student that will eventually be his. Anyway, disorderly at first, but the higher self has its methods, you know, and can force thinking. And, you know, and so there we go, you know, the worse, the better. Sometimes there are those really heavy moments when you just have to think. You just have to go deeper. And then with relief, you stop it and go back to a lower point of tension. But, okay, it continues to improve. More frequently come the occasions of withdrawing within. Have you ever felt that, you know, this, I'm sure you have, this kind of discomfort, something demands close attention. And there you are, you discover that it can only be relieved by deeper and deeper meditation. This is that kind of, I would call it Vulcanian pressure of the spiritual will of the soul upon the personality. It does bring relief, and probably it has to do with an insight whose time has come. Of course, the personality will resist the light. You wouldn't think so, but it does. And then it gets more and more uncomfortable until you finally give in and really go as deeply as you can. More frequently come the occasions of withdrawal within, until there arises for the man several lives given to mystic meditation and aspiration, culminating in, usually in a life given entirely to it. What can we call it? The monastery, the nunnery, the convent, whatever. There you are in the cloister, just meditating away. That was the a medieval approach, and he talks about certain types of mystics that have a very, very strong Neptunian influence, and they've been very prominent over the last 1,000 years or so. So, culminating in a life given entirely to it. And what DK seems to be implying, hinting, suggesting, is that the people in his groups of some 50 students or so, they've had that life of personality apotheosis at a certain point in their development, maybe relatively recently, and then some lives in which meditation begins spottily to increase, and then a life in a convent, monastery, cloister, nunnery, whatever, where there is a life of meditation and prayer too. Then they're ready for his group. So if we go back far enough, hidden behind just a veil that we probably cannot easily detect, these lives of personality excellence, what did he say, mentally colossal, emotionally vibrant, physically perfect, they have existed for us, and the life of retreat, withdrawal, inner attitude, spiritual introspection, probably also for so many of us. And, you know, in the new schools, we'll be given methods of accurately remembering certain past lives which are of importance. Not every little thing, you know, you can get overloaded, but when there's a line of connection between a certain past life and present circumstances, and when illumination could come because of it, okay, then it's useful to know how to get from point B to point A. A is where you are now. We've all been built up in a way that is logical. What we are now is the result of what we have thought, what we have done, how we have reacted to how we have felt. It's a cumulative growth. It just doesn't come out of nowhere. This is where people make a terrible mistake. They imagine that how they are is how God made them. God made me this way, you know. Well, go deeper and find the truth that you made yourself this way. That will be a big load of responsibility on your shoulders when you admit to that. And a lot of people, they don't want to admit that at all. But when you take responsibility for what you are and responsibility for what you must do, it really is one of the very first indications that the soul is operative. Soul contact is occurring, and the sense of responsibility, maybe in both of those modes, is the indication that it is so. If we try to escape from responsibility, we are tying ourselves in a knot, and further progress is not possible. The responsibility we should have managed will just come back to us, be dumped upon us, and will seem to cause retardation because we haven't dealt with it yet. As Dane Rudyard called it, you know, karma, the unfinished business of the past. Unfinished business. Do you have the sense of when you're engaged in new business, which is progressive, and when it's unfinished business, which is just a hangover and needs to be dealt with, corrected? I think I can maybe discriminate a little bit that way. Maybe you can too. What had its origins in the past, and what is along the line of progression, perhaps indicated somewhat by the past, but is certainly new in terms of your attempt to accomplish it and deal with it. So anyway, mystic meditation. A good, strong Neptune helps with that. Uranus being the sign of the occult mind, and given much more, or related much more to the kind of occult meditation which we're being taught, but not without the underpinning of Neptune. It marks, says the Tibetan, the point of the highest emotional aspiration, by the way, from which you can die, you know. DK talks about people who have died of their aspiration, so intense that it just lifted them right out of the body and out of the opportunity to continue here and now in the managing of the karma. Maybe that's why we have something called the veil of aspiration on the etheric plane. It's kind of an escape, isn't it? So it marks the point of the highest emotional aspiration apart from the scientific application of the law via the mental body. These laws are those governing true occult meditation. You know, the law of sacrifice, let's say, the law of magnetic impulse, the law of service, the law of repulse, the law of group progress. I always forget what the sixth one is. I have a picture of the symbol. Seventh one is law of the lower four. And, well, look it up, you know. I always end up having to go back and look up number 6. I think it has a lot to do with the spiritual triad. And, you know, different laws, systemic laws and so forth. One of our colleagues is doing or completing a really exhaustive study on occult law. Good thing too, I mean, he has so much seventh ray and he's beautifully equipped to do that. And then this is one of the ways in which the Moria Federation, through the written projects of their students, can help others who are also students of these deep matters. But you know, I'm kind of I'm kind of tempted. That's the problem. I always get tempted to go deeper into it. Does it have the word magnetic response or something? I'm not sure. Let's see. Laws of the soul. Only one? Reference? Well, I think, yeah. Oh, how fortunate, how fortunate. I'll show you this in a minute. I was partially correct here. It's a very interesting law, and the very high, and he says very little. Okay, so there it is. It is the law of magnetic expansive response. And then the law of the lower four. So they are advanced laws. And here, later in Cosmic Fire, and I hope you can see this, these laws of the soul, laws of expansive response number 6, the esoteric name is not given, and its symbol is a flaming rosy sun, kind of reminds you of the 4th of the formulas, a sun of many colors and cruder colors turning into more pastel and gentle and refined colors. And it's expansive energy, and it's the 3rd ray, the adapting factor. We probably can tie all these things in. Let's see if I can... well, I'm afraid, yeah, here it is. You should be able to see that. And then the lower 4, coming in under the 5th ray. Every one of these has its own ray. Sacrifice, the 4th ray. Magnetic impulse, the 2nd. The law of service, the 6th. So there's the 2, 4, 6 right there. And everything else is on the hard line. Law of repulse, the 1st ray. Law of group progress, the 7th ray. Law of expansive response, the one I always, on the 3rd ray. And then the law of the lower 4 on the 5th ray. Very deep things, and probably to be used in a new type of masonry, I would guess. I mean, there are all kinds of analogical, pictorial things going on in masonry that help people get a handle on some higher thoughts, but these are the true occult images and will be useful. So where was I? That's always the question, isn't it? Where was I? All right. This is going to, I think I've removed myself from where I needed to be. Let's see. Maybe. Yeah, there we are. Well, this is where he says it, doesn't it? Isn't it? So I'm anticipating what I've already read. And he says, behind each of you who are working definitely under one of the masters, and he's pretty much talking to his students, isn't he? So here it is. Behind each of you who are working definitely under one of the masters lie 2 lives of culmination, the life of worldly apotheosis and the life of intensest meditation along the mystical or emotional, intuitional line. That's so Neptunian, is it not? And then, you know, the sun shines, the personality factor shines, the sun being the, in a way, the 5th of the non-sacred planets. It's not really the sun, but sun is considered, strangely, a non-sacred planet. So the sun of worldly apotheosis shines here. And, you know, that may have been a long time ago, maybe it's easier for us to kind of remember the emotional life, the emotional, intuitional, mystical life. I think it's easier. It's more recent, isn't it? Okay. This meditative life was taken either in a monastery or nunnery in Middle Europe by those linked with the Master Jesus and his disciples, or in India, Tibet, or China by the pupils of Master M. Moria or Master K.H. Okay, well, there it is. I'm elaborating on things which are just about to come up in the book, but which I haven't seen. So for the moment, the memory is somewhat working. Well, we've been there. And, you know, depending upon the degree of our interest in these matters, you know, that's a confirmation. Our degree of interest. We're all missing something, you know. I mean, we're not rounded out in our causal body. Not yet. Otherwise, we'd be pretty much ready to hand it in that accolade of fire. But we're not there yet. The third initiation is a high attainment, and it's not the fourth, even though the two can be taken in the same life. Startlingly, the second, third, and fourth can be taken in the same life, and he uses the word usually in that connection. When you kind of look at yourself and other people and you wonder, can that be so? Page 84 and 85 of Initiation Human and Solar, right there between those two pages. But progress is rapid once the second degree is established, and because new teachers and exemplars and leaders, even of the fifth degree, will be needed, many of them, the pressure is on to attain more rapidly. And maybe we can. I'm thinking we can, as long as rapid attainment and ambition do not present themselves together. You can have rapid attainment, and the urge can be service and helpfulness and not your own grandiosity. No matter how grand you may think you are, all of us are just the tiniest little infinitesimal blip compared to what we really are. Every one of us, every perception, every perception indicates a being of some kind, and every being is one being. Well, a platitude easily repeated, and you know, a platitude maybe of the abstract mind, but the intuitional registering of it, that's what we're working on. Now comes to you all, or to all of you, the most important series of lives to which the previous points of culmination were but stepping stones. You know, it's always that 1, 2, 3. It's not personality grandeur. It's not mystical, emotional, aspirational meditation. It's something else now. In the lives immediately ahead of those upon the path will come final achievement through the instrumentality of the ordered occult meditation based on law. Powerful statement, and applying to all of us. if we are of the type that really persists, really sticks with it, in the lives immediately ahead of those upon the path will come final achievement through the instrumentality of the ordered occult meditation based on law. Well, there's Uranus, right? And to a certain extent, Saturn, law. Uranus is also law. It's the breaking of the law, but it's according to the law. I mean, conditioned laws are broken according to the laws which are presented by the archetype of purpose. It's uncomfortable to break one's conditioning, which may not at all be reflective of the archetype or always has deficiencies. But with the archetype, under Uranus, the right arrangement of things, under the seventh ray and first ray, presents itself, and then we can modify our conditioned life so that our conditioning resembles as close as possible the fixed design, the inner arrangement, the inner archetype, which says this is how you are to be in the lower worlds, as a reflection of how you already are in the higher worlds. For some few may come attainment in this life or the next, for others shortly in other lives. It's DK's estimation of time. He says, there are worse tragedies than to die. He knows and tells us that when we die, we shall be confronted with a very familiar experience. Probably we won't realize the familiarity of it until it's happening. And then we will realize it and say, oh yes, oh this. And in the future, lives will be shorter, if anything, as the ability to execute purpose skillfully will be increased. So, for some few may come attainment in this life or the next, for others shortly in other lives. For a few, there lies ahead, is he talking to his students, the attainment of the mystical method to be based later on the occult or mental method. Well, the Alice Bailey students are so often accused of being too mental, but they have a very mental master in that respect, who, by the way, is one whose ashram radiates the energy of right human relations. So it's not just mental, no, not at all. There's a great compassion and patience, helpfulness behind all that mentality. When you really look at such a teacher as Master DK, and you compare him with just other normal teachers in the normal educational world, you can see what he has attained. Something of it anyway. And you can see the deficiencies of more limited types of education. Here we have a real rounding out in this method of education of knowledge, wisdom, love, and will, and purpose. And that, how often is that found in the normal methods of education? Not very often. So what a great gift it is to have discovered this material, given with all encouragement and with compassion and with inspiration to those human beings who can respond to it. We have to be grateful that we are among those human beings who can respond in some measure to what is given. I mean, more than we can ever absorb is given, he has told us, but we can respond in some measure, and it makes such a difference in how we live our life, and the kind of example we are inclined to set, even if we don't always succeed, and the general educational impact that we have upon others. You know, in the beginning, 4 points: inquire the way, obey the inner impulses of the soul, pay no attention to the worldly wisdom of even the wisest in the worldly sense, and set an example. Those are the 5 methods of attaining adeptship. And remember, it's not about ambition, because adepts of the 5th degree, initiates of the 5th degree, are really going to be needed in quantity during the Aquarian age. Now, given that the 5th ray, which naturally by numerical resonance has a lot to do with the 5th initiation, even though it's the 1st ray that's normally given in connection with that initiation, given the 5th ray, given Leo, given the increasing strength of the 1st ray, we may wonder, how in the world could we achieve adeptship when you accurately assess where you stand now? But without pride and without overestimation or whatever, there is a need. And when you've set yourself to fulfill the need, there's a wind at your back. Or if you're swimming in the stream, the current flows faster. And you are borne along by other energies which hasten your achievement. And not for yourself, of course, but for the joy of doing the Master's work, increasingly the joy of doing the Master's work, and more importantly, even the helpfulness that you can render when you're in the position of doing the Master's work. It may not work specifically of the Master, but that which the Master has assigned to initiates of your caliber and my caliber. And we will find eventually, and maybe not so long, and maybe during the Aquarian age, for those who really work assiduously at the task, that mastership will be possible. It's just a drop in the bucket, you know. The masters are amused, it is said, at how their students overestimate them. It's a bit like calling Jesus the only Son of God in the entire universe, you know. That sense of proportion is missing. But we can achieve, through humility, an adjusted sense of proportion and know what is the scope and the possibilities of each initiate, and what is our own scope and how we can widen that and deepen that. So the opportunity now is with us. If we will but realize it and do our best, like the Tibetan, for those who are called that way, to teach and spread the knowledge of the ageless wisdom wherever response can be found. Now, others will have a different, dharma in all this. They may not be along the teaching line at all. they will be along an important ashramic line, and they just have to carry out what that line is according to their ray. They don't want to bark up the wrong tree, as it were. I mean, if you're a leader in some political sense, you don't want to be seeking out the destiny of a teacher and vice versa. You want to stick to your own stream, and then you'll be supplemented by other qualities and abilities in the general rounding out process, but at least you'll be working along the right stream. So it's so important to determine what is your purpose at this time, given your abilities, and to stick to those indicated tasks which align with your purpose. It takes a while in the meditative life to know what that should be. You know, if I think of my own life, you know, I sometimes use myself as an example. Maybe it's helpful, maybe it's not. But, you know, what's an opera director doing here? Examining with as much meticulous entirety as he can manage the details of the ageless wisdom. Well, you know, we go through transitions and we move from the past to the future, past to the present to the future. And we learn that we exhaust personality indications and move on to that which the soul indicates. We stay alert and we suffer through the period of transition and change from something that is assured to something that is of great interest but carries much less surety than the comfort zone. Probably in your life you have had to leave certain comfort zones. Maybe you're still clinging to them to a certain extent, but already you're being stretched into a new area where the exhilaration, the inspiration seem to lie, but the comfort of habitual involvement is not there. And yet you know the pressure within you pushes you in that direction, and you have to go, hopefully wisely, because we don't always make our transitions wisely. I guess look back upon your life at decisions you've made, some of them very good, some of them very bad. Try to see what the consequences have been. Breathe a sigh of relief that when you had a choice between alternatives and you chose the good one, you saved a lot of pain for yourself and others in the long run. We do have to be able to examine the life and see what the general shape has been. As DK said, that geometrical figure appears, telling us, summarizing, symbolizing the nature of the incarnation we've just had, and becoming more definite, more regular, more beautiful as we move along. But we have to be able to assess what it is and how we've done. I have to recommend that movie called Illusion with Kirk Douglas. He lived, I think, to be 103. He just recently passed on. But he must have believed in these things, you know, because it's all about the Akashic records and altering them through wise choice. And we have the opportunity, too, to examine each one of our decisions looming before us and say, does it go left or does it go right? And we want to choose what in occultism is called the right-hand path, which is not the same as the left and the right in politics, necessarily. So it takes a lot of alert, observant living to be that observer that lives the life as the liver and the observer. And as the observer, we find out finally that the monad is the observer, the true spirit. At first, it isn't that, or it doesn't seem to be that, but eventually we realize we have been the spirit all along in every capacity, and wiser, more and more wisely, we choose according to the indications and the destiny of our monad, our spirit. Okay, well, I think, with these letters, basically I'm not going to run on into letter 3 after we've spent, a couple hours here and a bit more in letter 2. Or maybe even more than a couple of hours, to just the recent work. Letter 3 is looming here. And let's just see, right now we are on page 13. And we began in letter 2. So we went from 5 from, and we'll go from 8 to 13 on the 21st of July. That's program 5. Okay, and then I'll bring it down to where we can continue. If I'm able to continue today, I hope so. Yeah, okay. So, this is Finland. Yep. And this is the end of program. We've just finished program 5, and it's been from 8 to 13. And we'll start with 13. Maybe, well, can I be bold enough and just leave it on the 21st as if I'm definitely coming back right away and going to do it? Maybe I'll try that. And if it doesn't work out, I'll change it. So letter number 3, points considered when assigning meditation. That will be our next work. Meanwhile, lots of love, many blessings. Study hard, deeply, meditate deeply, widely, and use everything you've got in service to help elevate the whole human and planetary situation so that the divine plan can be manifest. And we'll see you soon.